Okay, so what we're going to be doing in today's lesson is we're going to be practicing balancing equations and then identifying what type of reaction occurred. So if you haven't done your types of reaction notes that go through each different type of reaction, you'll want to do that first before doing this practice page. So we have 5 different types of reactions. We have our synthesis, we have our decomposition, we have our single replacement, our double replacement, and our combustion. So I think we should identify what type of reaction is occurring, and then we can go back and balance our equation. So if we look at this equation first, we have our Na3, we have our PO4, we have our K, and we have our OH. So we have sodium, phosphate, potassium, and hydroxide. So this is our reaction side. So this is what's happening before the reaction. Now let's look at where these went with our products. So we have our sodium still here. Our phosphate comes over here. Then we have our potassium over here. And our hydroxide over here. So we can see that both of these kind of swapped partners. The sodium bonded with the hydroxide and the phosphate bonded with the potassium. So they both swapped partners. So that's going to make this a double replacement reaction because both groups or both elements are swapping its partner or who they're connected to there. Good. So the first step, I'm going to clear this screen real quick and we can put double replacement back over here. The first step we've done, we've identified what type of reaction is occurring. Now we need to balance our equation. And to do that, we're going to go through and first count how many atoms of each element we have on both sides of our equation. And then we're going to balance those atoms. So I'm first writing out all of the different things we have first. So we have sodium, we have phosphate, which is PO4, we have potassium, and then we have our hydroxide. So on the reactant side, we have 3 sodiums. Remember, PO4 is together as one because it's our polyatomic. So we have 1 phosphate, 1 potassium, and 1 hydroxide, 1 OH. On the other side, we have 1 sodium. Oops. Didn't mean to put 0 here. We have 1 hydroxide. We have 1 PO4 because PO4 is stuck together. There's not 4 of them. There's 1 PO4 together. And then we have 3 potassiums there. So as we go through, we can notice that our sodium, we have 3 on one side and 1 on the other. So I'm going to add a coefficient of 3 out front of here. So we can change this sodium to 3. That also changes our hydroxide to 3 because that coefficient multiplies all parts of our compound. So now we're still not balanced because now our hydroxide and our potassium have 3 on our product side, and our reactant side, they only have 1. So what we want to do is we're going to add a coefficient of 3 out in front of this part of our equation. And that balances our equation. So let's do one more example together. I'm going to clear this screen. And let's look at number 2 here. Let's first identify what type of reaction is occurring. So we have NO2, and it's breaking up into O2 and nitrogen. So oxygen and nitrogen. So we're starting with something, and it's breaking it apart into 2 different pieces of itself, basically. What we call that type of reaction is decomposition. We start with something and we break it into its two different parts. So that would be a decomposition reaction. So then you'll want to go through and you'll want to balance that equation, counting your number of atoms and then balancing it out and making sure the atoms in the beginning equal the atoms in the end. So let's look at number 3 real quick and identify what type of reaction is occurring here. So we have C6H12 plus O2, which is oxygen, is going to CO2 plus H2O, water. So what's important to identify here is in our reaction side, we have an O2 or an oxygen. So look back on your notes and see what happens when something reacts rapidly with oxygen. That type of reaction is called combustion. So if you see oxygen by itself, O2 with maybe a coefficient out in front, or O2 by itself, we have combustion because something is reacting with oxygen to form the products. So we have a combustion reaction here. So I want you to go through and practice the rest of these, starting with identifying what type of reaction you have occurring, and then going through and balancing each of your equations.